Continuing chapter 3 in part 2. The Jews then did not find their conception of Satan in the captivity. They never adopted the Oriental mythology, nor did Jesus adopt their notions. Well, Judaism sort of required the Persian mythology to exist, you could say. The Satan of his teaching is a revelation, as we shall see as we make progress with this history. We shall find that Satan is a person spoken of as thoroughly individualized in the mind of Jesus as subsequently of his followers, and his existence repeatedly referred to, asserted, or implied as a familiar and important truth. Jesus believed himself to have been assailed by Satan, and as we know nothing to the contrary, we believe so too. But he nowhere states, and we have no right to affirm, certainly no right to consider it an article of faith, that Satan appeared to him in bodily form as a man, a member of the Sanhedrin, or a scribe. When a cunning evil man discovers a pure and great spirit about to engage in a great work, he offers resistance and presents obstacles. The attractions of the universe bring them face to face, as a negatively electrified body is drawn towards one that is positively electrified. Satan found Jesus, as he finds you and me, and he instantly opened an attack on his virtue, whether Jesus saw Satan or not, and held this colloquy in articulate words, or had the suggestion presented to him, and from his most inmost spirit made the response. We cannot know. I mispronounced some of that, but nor is it important. The spiritual history of Jesus comes forward as well on either theory, and on either we have all the lessons necessary for our instruction. The latter is free, however, from the embarrassments of the former, as before mentioned, such as the bodily, visible temper, taking the person of Jesus to the battlements of the temple and the top of the mountain. You know, because if Jesus is somehow God, what, Satan can move God around? What sense that make? Unless you're supposed to switch the titles, Satan and God. But if Almighty God gave Satan temporary power to do these things, as he is represented in the book of Job to have done, and it need give trouble only to such historians as strive to read the history of God's world with God totally ignored. The writer of these pages believes as much in the existence of God as he does in the existence of man. The first temptation of Jesus was through the body, by the lust of the flesh. Well, saying, so it's a text of belief, not, how is it historically investigated if the guy never proves that there's a God, yet he claims there's a God? So it's obviously something other than history. The tempter said, "If you be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread." It was well put. Jesus had just received at Jordan a marvelous confirmation of his opinion of himself as the Son of God. If he was the Son of God, he was the Messiah. Well, the phrase would have been used for both. If the Messiah, he could work miracles. Here was a case where a miracle seemed needed, but it was a temptation to place himself out of the harmony of the universal order, and to do so for a selfish purpose. He replied in the language of the holy books. It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Now, maybe a miracle's never out of the universal order. It's just, we don't know the method, or we don't know the means. If the universal order is what God has ordained, obviously it's not. It was a human and a manly response. Whatever may have been his inmost thoughts of himself, whatever profound and inscrutable self-consciousness, he always knew himself to be a man. He meets the temper on the platform of common humanity, and there fights out the battle of virtue. The passage he quotes in reply is from Deuteronomy 8:3. It occurs in the history of the temptation of the people of Israel, in which temptation they fell, even as Adam fell when he was tempted. It implies not that men are to put aside the ordinary food of the body, but that when a man is in the discharge of duty, he may depend upon God's providential arrangements. Word does not occur in the original. It is everything that proceedeth from God's mouth, every expression of his will. Even when men eat bread, they do not live by bread alone, because there's supposed to be thanks offered and stuff, right? There is a vitality maintained by the Father of spirits in men, which makes the bread productive of growth or reparative of decay. And remember, the intelligence attached to the house of for son and father, provider, pole, etc. Jesus might have yielded to the temptation, then had he parted with his messiahship, his ordination to the leadership of those striving, jihad is the Arabic word, to be bravely good. He would no longer have been a deliverer. He would himself have been a captive of his lusts. The second temptation addressed the spirit of Jesus through the intellect, the lust of the eye. It will be perceived that I follow the order of Luke rather than that of Matthew as being more logical. Because if it was inspired by God, there wouldn't be more or less logical. There'd be different logic, perhaps, because it's to teach different people, but it wouldn't be a more or less logical thing. Jesus was present bodily or by vivid mental representation. It matters not which, in Jerusalem and on the pinnacle of the temple. The precise spot is, of course, not ascertainable, but a probable suggestion is that Jesus was placed on the lofty porch which overhung the valley of the Kedron, Smith's New Testament History, where the steep side of the valley was added to the height of the temple wall, as described by Josephus in his Antiquities, volume 15, 11, 5. And made a depth down, which it was terrible. It was terrific to gaze. Then a tempter said, "Cast thyself down." He followed up the suggestion by an abbreviated but verbatim quotation from the sacred book, namely the 91st Psalm. Isn't that the midday demon psalm? Or something near there. It is written, He shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. An assurance given to the children of the Almighty God in general must a priori apply to the Son of God, one who has been pronounced so by a voice out of the heavens. Now then, said the tempter, perform a brilliant miracle. Fling thyself from this height, and when thou touchest the ground, the people will flock to thee, and without question hail thee as the Messiah. It addressed itself principally to the imagination of Jesus. It was one form of miracle which the Messiah, such as the Jews looked for, was traditionally expected to perform. It's not about which fulfillment. Jesus replied, "It is written again." The words Pauline, translated again, does not signify on the contrary, but rather in another place, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God," Deuteronomy 6:16. To obey the seductive suggestion would have been so grateful to a selfish vanity, but he repels it. The divine providence must never be invoked for selfish ends. A third form of temptation assailed Jesus through the passions, the pride of life, ambition, the last infirmity of noble minds. Satan made to pass before the mind of Jesus a panorama of the kingdoms of the world, their power and their glory. He professed to be owner master of these. He tendered them to Jesus on the solitary condition that Jesus should pay him homage, as if he had said, "You came to be the Messiah. You can accomplish your message better by a partnership with me. You can at once go to the head of the world. You are the Son of God. Join me. Acknowledge my world sovereignty, and then I will remove all obstructions from your path to supreme power and glory." It was a proposition to use physical force for the accomplishment of moral results, to turn from the path of suffering and labor and martyrdom for the truth. It was the state proposing an alliance with the church for the accomplishment of a good end by sinister means, but it involved homage to evil, tribute to the chief of evil. Whatever may be said of other temptations, this must be admitted to have been internal. Well, why? Because there can be beings other than oneself, whether internal or external, that a person is dealing with. The physical conditions of the planet are such that there cannot possibly be an elevation from which all the kingdoms of the world could be seen, and there's no conceivable position in which their power and glory could have been visible. Well, as much as that's true, people believe that for a long time, and some places still some people believe it, because there's some passages of the Bible that can't literally be true without this flat earth or concave or convex or whichever side they're taking. But it is to be observed that this, but perhaps the original word was the land. So perhaps we're talking about he was up at the tallest mountain, and but we don't have Aramea or Syriac or whatever. We don't have it in a language that Jesus most probably spoke better. He could have spoke some Greek, but it is to be observed that this temptation assailed Jesus on the Messiah side of his nature and expectations. He now, if never before, believed himself to be the Messiah. He was about to exhibit himself as such to his nation. The people of the Jews, as he knew, held that the Messiah, upon his arrival, should first break the Roman yoke, and then, by a series of conquests, military and moral, reduce all the nations to the rule of the Jews and the religion of Judaism. You can sort of establish historically that none of the prophets followed or taught Judaism, and you can show to a great extent this to be the Bible. Tanakh indicates that, and there's some Talmud passages and stuff that back it up, and more historical stuff. But why should not Jesus satisfy this natural expectation? And I mean that even if you can't historically establish, like David and Solomon were historical figures, but almost nothing that they say religiously about them was historically established. But and I don't think were any of the other prophets in the Bible historical in that sense. But why not abandon the method of leavening the world by the sure but very slow process of the operation of truth, and transmute it at once by a single stroke of divine power, such as he could have exercised if he were the Son of God? The very attempt would have been homage to Satan, a bending of the knee to evil. He was willing for this wonderfully endowed young man to exercise all the authority and enjoy all the glory of the most splendid viceroyalty of the world, while he retained supreme dominion. The reply of Jesus is, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt do homage to the Lord thy God, and to him only shalt thou worship. Well, isn't there a quote to back that up? And probably Lord isn't the sort of Lord that people were calling Jesus, but, spiritual master or liege lord or, whatever. The answer shows that Jesus now certainly recognized the instigator of his evil thoughts, the suggestion of idolatry of a very foul kind, the worship of the spirit of evil, unveils the satanic character of the tempter, and Jesus repels him. Well, the worship of something other than God being, the worst commandment violation, right? There, by worship I mean treating something as a deity. There is an expression in Luke 4:6 worth notice. Satan says, All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered to me, and to whomsoever I will give it. That to which special attention is called is the acknowledgement of his inferiority by the chief of evil spirits amid intense braggadocio. He had not this dominion of personal, natural right, but had been permitted to enter upon it. The whole statement is a falsehood when asserted by the evil one, but the subservience and limit which he admits is a characteristic of the Satan of whom Jesus speaks, which distinguishes him from the Ahriman of the Magian mythology, from which Jesus and the Jews are said to have derived their notion of Satan, and is very important in this beginning of our examination of what Jesus teaches as to the chief of evil. Well, wouldn't the guys vary? And worshiping the Davas instead of Ahura Mazda, or even the Ahuras, that would have been a chief goal of influence, right? Another general remark must be made. It is observable that Jesus never attempts to rebuke temptation with logic. He has no argument with Satan. He confronts him with the Word of God. He quotes the sacred books of his people. This homage paid to the Old Testament scriptures, he wouldn't have called it the Old Testament. No one, not even Paul, referred to them as the Old Testament or tried to rearrange them. By a mind endowed naturally with greater gifts than that of Moses or David or any of the prophets or any other human being, gives those books an exalted and enduring importance. Now, we can establish away from some of that more than any other human being and all that. I would venture there's smarter people on earth right now than these prophets that we speak of. But, they were given enough intelligence to convey their work and address it to their people, right? But let's not make distinctions between the prophets or discriminations. If we don't know, we don't know. The history tells us that when the tempter departed, angels came and ministered to Jesus. We have seen the statement of the announcement of his birth by angels both before and after it occurred. Their immediate attendance upon Jesus brings them nearer to this biography, and as this portion is taken to be autobiographic, it is the first mention made by Jesus of these superior beings. It is the proper place to institute an inquiry into the position which they held in Jewish literature and thought before the birth of Jesus, as preparatory to what he himself teaches upon the subject. It is to be noticed how little is given in what they call the Old Testament writings to gratify the curiosity of man, of that which he is supposed to have immediate and great concern, there is much stated. The heavenly world, the residence of good spirits, is frequently spoke of, and the many things told of its inhabitants, not as doctrines of religion, but as facts. They are regarded as the highest order of created intelligences, all other creatures being below them in dignity and station. The prophet Isaiah says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also Jehovah," well, we don't pronounce it that way, "sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphim, each one had 6 wings, and one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is Jehovah of hosts, and the whole earth is full of glory." This nearness to the central throne of the universe is set forth also in Ezekiel, Yichizdakyal, right? Is that how you say it? And Daniel, which is a rewrite of something at least 1,000 years before. We don't know when that originates, but so Kadush, 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 Yahweh Booth, Wakul Hearts. I forget how it ends. But let's remember one thing, right? This could have been something else, right? It could have been the manifestation of God's glory some other way. Oh, there's an angel. But the idea, God sitting on the throne, some languages, the reference is a little bit more ambiguous. You could say he's situated, he's exalted even beyond the throne, but that God is supported by the throne is problematic, right? And the idea of otherwise of the personification of that. But, well, in the Quran, they talk about the footstool, which is less than the throne, and the footstool is greater than the heavens and the earth, and by the lowest heaven is meant the one with the stars and all that. So how are we supposed to talk about God in human terms if that's what's going on? But the former says in 10:1, "Then I looked and beheld in the firmament that was above the head of the cherubim, there appeared over them as it were a sapphire stone, as the appearance of the likeness of a throne." Also in 28:14, "Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." In Daniel 10:13, the angel Michael is called one of the chief princes. And in 12:1, the great prince. In 2 Chronicles 18:18, it is written, "Again he said, Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting upon his throne, and all the host of heaven standing on his right hand and on his left." In 2 Kings 19:15, Jehovah is represented as dwelling among the cherubim. And some of the language is more loose than other, but established, God as a noun and verb, increasing existence, all ways to translate Jehovah. Lord isn't really one of them. Isn't both books of Chronicles and both books of Kings, there's no first and second. It's one book. One book of Samuel, one book of Chronicles, one book of Kings. They are represented as powerful creatures. In Psalm 103:20, David exclaims, "Bless the Lord, ye angels that excel in strength." Evidence of their strength is supposed to be given in the statements that in 3 days an angel as an agent of God, destroyed 70,000 persons out of Israel and Judah, 2 Samuel 24, and that in one night an angel destroyed the army of Sennacherib, numbering 185,000 men, 2 Kings 19. But in the latter case, certainly the angel of Jehovah is meant, and of him we shall find the more hereafter. Their activity is set forth in such expressions as Psalm 114:4, who maketh his angels spirits, and his ministers a flame of fire. Many things are ascribed to cherubim and seraphim. But made it as a flame of fire. Could he be talking about jinn versus the malaika? The light beings over there, the fire beings over there. Many things are ascribed to cherubim and seraphim. In the 9th chapter of Daniel, we are told that during the time it required to utter a prayer, the angel Gabriel came to him from the supreme heaven. Dr. Dwight says, System of Theology, Volume 1, this is a rapidity exceeding all the comprehension of the most active imagination, surpassing the amazing swiftness of light. One of the things when it comes to prayer and other rituals, the biblical word for prayer is usually not just the same as you just say stuff, or, there's ritual gestures and other criteria to follow, right? That you don't give it up when you're having the experience. You continue the experience, and the experience comes through in the moments in between, or the moments with it, or after it, or, Their intelligence was set forth in the ascription to them of eyes, as in Ezekiel, the face of man, the usual oriental symbol of intelligence. The name cherub means fullness of knowledge. In the speech of Mephibosheth to David, I don't know sometimes if the TH is just a sound or whether it's a th. To David, the wisdom of the angels is implied, but my lord, the king, is as an angel of God. Do, therefore, what is good in thine eyes, 2 Samuel 19:27. So the Malach, the the being of the kingdom, you're being as that being because you're completely submissive unto God. Because those light beings have no choice. That's why they're the unfallen angels. But it gets confusing a little bit, the angelology and stuff of the Bible. In every mention of them or allusion to them, their holiness seems to be implied, as in Daniel 4:13-23 and 8:13, and Genesis 28:12. More than in any precise statement does the air of this thought pervade all the Jewish holy books written by men diversely educated and living far apart. Their numbers are described as immense. In Genesis 32:2, Jacob is said to have called the place Mahanaim, signifying two hosts or camps. So Mahan is the camp. For when he met the angels of God, he said, this is Jehovah's hosts. So see, there's a difference. The same idea is in 1 Chronicles 12:22. For that time, day by day, they came unto David to help him until it was a great host, like the host of God. The supreme being is repeatedly called Jehovah, God of hosts, Yahweh, the spout. It's a sort of like the Ganesh thing. David in Psalm 68 exclaims, the chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. But whatever spirituality intelligence, power, activity, and holiness are ascribed to them, there is always implied an infinite distance between them and Jehovah. The well-known passage in Job 4:18 is very emphatic. His angels he charged with folly. We sometimes find angels in their terrene manifestations eating and drinking, Genesis 18:8 and 19:3, but in Judges 13, 15, and 16, the angel who appeared to Noah declined in a very pointed manner to accept his hospitality. The manner in which the Jews obviated the apparent discrepancy and the sense in which they understood such passages appear from the apocryphal book of Tobit, chapter 12, verse 19, where the angel is made to say, "It seems to you indeed as though I did eat and drink with you, but I use invisible food which no man can see." This intimates that they were supposed to simulate when they appeared to partake of man's food, but that yet they had food of their own proper to their natures. Milton, who was deeply read in the angelic literature, derides these questions. Paradise Lost, 433 to 439. But if angels do not need food, if their spiritual bodies are inherently incapable of waste or death, it seems not likely that they gratuitously perform an act designed in all its known relations to promote growth, to repair waste, and to sustain existence. See McClintock and Strong's Cyclopedia in Loco. There are only dim suggestions of their employment in heaven, as in 1 Kings 22:19, Isaiah 6:1-3, Daniel 7:9 and 10, intimating most profound worship and adoration, but they are everywhere spoken of as the agents of God's providence when he discharges the functions of supreme moral governor in punishing the wicked and directing the good and sustaining the despondent, as when they destroyed the firstborn of Egypt, Exodus 12:23, guided Abraham's servant, Genesis 24:7-40, and cheered Jacob at Bethel, Genesis 28:12. In the earlier history, the intercourse of the communication of the angels with men, repeatedly following familiar domestic life, is destitute of awfulness. This is illustrated by the story told in Genesis 18. For a season, they are not so frequently mentioned, but in the times of the judges, when the people were deprived of prophetic guidance, and in the time of the captivity, when they were especially exposed to the influences of heathenism, whatever that means, other religions, right? These angelic visitations reappear and seem to have constituted God's special agency for communicating with his chosen people. They then inspired awe, provoked awe, more like it, but more and more that feeling deepened with Abraham's dignified and natural entertainment of the angels, as so graphically given in Genesis 18. Contrast Gideon's apprehension, Judges 6:22, and the fright of the sons of Ornan, 1 Chronicles 21:20, and David's fear, 1 Chronicles 21:30, and the quaking and flight of Daniel's friends, Daniel 10:7, and Daniel's own speechlessness and swooning, Daniel 10:8, 15:17. This statement, as we shall see, prevailed in the popular mind in the times of Jesus, and always prevails in times of materialistic tendencies and among peoples made gross by devotion to mere animal results. In this connection, there is a presentation in what they call the Old Testament writings, which has of late years attracted great attention. Among the angelic revelations, we find the phrases Malach, Elohim, and Malach Yahweh. The angel of God and the angel of Jehovah, well, the same thing. You're talking about God as a noun and verb, and you're talking about the the source of all power, basically, all divinity, whatever you're going to call it, repeatedly occurring, especially the latter. Whatsoever or whosoever may be meant by this is certainly a personage very different from others who are ordinarily called angels, for no dogmatic purpose, but simply to show what views were held among the learned and unlearned Jews when Jesus appeared. We propose to present a condensed history of the world, for which we shall be largely indebted to Hengstenberg's Christology. In Genesis 16, 7 through 13, the angel of Jehovah is said to have found Hagar, and a prerogative of the supreme creator is ascribed to him, namely, the vast increase of her posterity. Hagar recognized him as God and expressed surprise that she had seen God and lived. Is that what's said, or is it something, different there? But certainly, encountering such a being as a light being can sometimes have that effect.